Hi everyone, it is the last Wednesday of 2016 and this is my last Pam Chat of the year. Now, before I get started with this Pam Chat, coming to you live from Tucson, Arizona, where I'm visiting my cousin Layla and her family, I want to start off by saying, hey, congratulations to my Boston College Eagles. You guys know that I went to law school at BC and they pulled out a squeaker of a win against Maryland in their bowl game, the who knows whatever bowl somewhere. These days there are so many bowl games, it's kind of hard to keep track of them all. Anyway, congratulations to Boston College Eagles. I do also have to congratulate my Miami Dolphins for, looks like they're going to make it into the playoffs, which is really exciting. I think that our team has finally found an identity. Its identity is that it's a running team with a strong defense, and Ndamukong Suh has been a really great addition on the defensive line. He's made that whole unit more physical, and they go after the quarterback a little bit better than they used to. And the team isn't trying to do too much, which I think is also really good. Matt Moore seems to be able to manage the game. So, congratulations to Miami. I still think they have their work cut out for them if they want a deep run into the playoffs. But, congratulations to them. I don't know what happened to Denver Broncos. They've just basically imploded. And I don't even know why. It's not like they lost their quarterback or something. I can't. I mean, Von Miller's still playing. And he's still playing well. So I don't know exactly what's gone on with Denver, but they've kind of lost their mojo of late. And I guess I should say something about this comment by Terry Bradshaw that, Mike Tomlin is, not at all a good coach. That really, it was a strange comment. First of all, I don't recall ever hearing a commentator say about an NFL coach, he's not a good coach at all. I've heard them say he's not good at motivating people. I've heard them say it was a bad call to go for it on 4th and 3. I've heard them say that, Pete Carroll did too much on the goal line. I've heard a lot of things. But to say that an NFL coach is not a good coach at all, I've not heard about anybody, not even the Cleveland Browns coach, not even like Jeff Fisher, coaches that have been fired, let alone about a coach as good as Mike Tomlin, who is a Super Bowl winning coach and who has had his team in the playoff year after year after year. Now, so to call him essentially a cheerleader is such a disrespect of his accomplishment. And I'm not a Steelers fan, people. I am not a Steelers fan. Rarely, if ever, do I defend the Steelers, but to say something like that about Mike Tomlin was completely inappropriate. So I got to throw a flag on that play and call unsportsmanlike conduct on Terry Bradshaw. And so moving on from football, there have been a couple things that have been going on over the last few days. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the political things. And then I'm going to talk about losing two icons at the end of 2016, which again has just been a horrible year for losing, really iconic performers and artists and folks like that. So anyway, I want to talk a little bit about politics, because one of the big discussions that has been going on this week is about the United States joining the United Nations and a resolution on the settlements issue with respect to Israel and the Palestinian territories. And I don't usually chime in on this type of topic because it's volatile, but B, because, I haven't really been, it's not been, I was running for office. It wasn't one of the top issues that we were discussing in that campaign. But I do feel like it's worth talking about because I want to explain how I see this. And I'm looking for engagement. I'm not trying to grandstand or shove my opinion down anybody's throat. I just want to tell you how I handicap this. Now, I want to make clear, I do support Israel. I support Israel's right to exist. I support Israel's right to defend herself. I believe that Israel is an ally of the United States and we are an ally of Israel. And that friendship is deep, long-standing, and it will not go the wayside ever. Our ties are not just political, they're cultural, they're personal, they're familial. And in order to better understand Israel, I, on my own dime and my own space, went there and stayed there for about 10 days just to get to know Israeli people, to understand their daily lives. I stayed at an Airbnb, very much low-key. It wasn't sponsored by any group. I just went to educate myself more about Israel. I've been to lots of other countries in that part of the world, and I wanted to learn more about Israel. And I had a wonderful time. It is a great country. It has amazing scenery and, of course, all of the historic and religious sites that are so worth seeing, but also has just great food. And Tel Aviv is a world city that is absolutely worth visiting. I rented a car and drove all the way to the Dead Sea and did the whole floating in the water and, Dead Sea spa thing. It was awesome. I had a wonderful time. But I want to talk about the settlements issue a little bit, and I'd like to give you an analogy to help you explain how I see this. Now, again, I'm not claiming I am absolutely right about this. If somebody knows more than I do, please chime in or let me know. I'm looking for engagement here. But let's say hypothetically that there was a border between the United States and Canada. We know that there is. If you go to Vermont, you'll find a border between the United States and Canada. And the United States and Canada were, let's say they had a disputed history. And the United States started building compounds on the Canadian side of that line. And not only did they build those compounds, but in those compounds, only Americans were allowed to live in that compound. Those compounds were not one or two buildings, but multiple buildings with multiple units. And because it was in Canadian territory, to protect that compound, we garrisoned one or two platoons of U.S. Marines to protect that compound. And over time, there are stores built and dry cleaners and there's a medical clinic and all of a sudden that compound has a school and at first it's an elementary school, but then they build a middle school and a high school, and there's a whole community now that lives on that other side of the border. Now, I think we would understand that that's functionally a land grab, especially if the only people allowed to live in that compound were American citizens. If we said, hey, yes, we know this is in Canadian territory, but only Americans can live here. I think we would understand that to be a land grab. We would understand that to be something that's not right. And that is where I'm struggling with the settlements issue, because the settlements are being built in what is understood to be Palestinian territory. Those settlements are inhabited by people who are Israeli citizens and who are Jewish. That they settle that. It is not a cohabitation situation. Those settlements are inhabited by Israeli citizens. And those settlements are protected by Israeli military and police forces. They have schools and they have stores and they have transportation, and they literally functionally exist in these compounds. And not surprisingly, the Palestinians are extremely upset about this. And it has been something that Israel has been criticized for again and again. Because functionally, over time, that land becomes annexed to Israel. It is a sort of slow creep way of gaining land. And that's a problem. Because rather than being something that helps drive forward a two-state peaceful solution, it's something that inhibits that. It's because it becomes a bone of contention to negotiations, and it becomes something that is emotionally causes all kinds of anger and desires for retribution and so on. So rather than being something that moves in the direction of peace, it's something that moves in the opposite direction. So I have a lot of problems with that. Now, I want you to understand that not even all Israelis support these settlements. This is something that has been driven by the right wing of politics in Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu is the leader of a right wing faction or a right wing party in Israel. There are plenty of people in Tel Aviv who do not support the settlements either. So this is not, as far as I'm concerned, a pro-Jewish or anti-Jewish thing. Just because I support Israel and I believe that our friendship is a critical diplomatic relationship with Israel, doesn't mean I agree with everything Israel does, any more than I would expect Israel to agree with everything the United States does. Sometimes the United States does wrong things that go badly. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there were people in Israel who said, hey, taking out Saddam Hussein might be a bad idea, because A, it was, and B, because it empowered Iran. I could understand completely if Israel said, hey, you know what, United States, we're friends, but we don't agree with that aspect of what you're choosing to do. That wouldn't demolish our friendship, nor would it make Israel an enemy of the United States. So I think a lot of the rhetoric around this disagreement is being overblown. You do not automatically become anti-Semitic because you do not support these settlements. And I think that that's something that needs to be made clear as well. So that's my understanding of the settlements issue, and I know it is part and parcel of a much bigger, much more complex issue. So I'm not saying that that resolves everything. You know, stop settlements and everything's cool. That is not how it works. It is way more complicated than that. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of territorial dispute. So I'm not saying that that resolves everything, but I fail to see how building more settlements drives the ball forward and in terms of trying to obtain peace and a two-state solution. So let's just call it like it is. It is working in the opposite direction of a two-state solution. It is really trying to create a one-state solution. The problem with a one-state solution is, are the Palestinians now Israeli citizens? And do they have the right to vote in Israel? And that is a very, very tough question. Because if that becomes the case, you may end up with a Muslim majority and a Jewish state. Think that through very carefully. I'm not sure that's where they want to go, because I think there's something very valuable in having a Jewish state. I think there's something very valuable about that. So creating a state where everybody is now encompassed in one border means that they get the voting rights too. And if they get the voting rights too, they might outvote the Jewish majority, the Jewish population. That may be someplace that Israel does not want to go. So let's think the downstream consequences of this before we move in this direction. I think that's something that we need to decide as an international community, but ultimately this is between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, whichever one they're negotiating with today. Could be Hamas, could be Fatah, whatever. I don't know how those relationships evolve, but anyway, long story short, I think this is a bad move, and this is the way I interpret it. But I am putting this out on video so that we just have an engagement and discussion and education on this issue, not so that we go around demonizing one another over it. It should not be an issue that splits our party or splits our unity as progressives, as Democrats, as Americans, and as citizens of the world. This should be something that we talk through in a spirit of understanding and cooperation rather than a spirit of demonization and hatred. So, enough about that. I do want to talk a little bit about what is going on politically, again, in Florida. I have been made abreast of the fact that some more maneuvers have taken place, and Dwight Bullard is now eligible to be Florida Democratic Party chair again, running from Gadsden County. I did get a chance to visit briefly Gadsden County while I was campaigning. It is north of Tallahassee. It's a predominantly agricultural community, and it's also a predominantly African American community. Look, if it is okay for someone to kind of do some backdoor maneuvering in Miami-Dade County to get their person, then it's perfectly okay for Gadsden County to do it too. Personally, to me, I don't think you get to say, oh, that's not cool, because that's how it's being done all over the state. I also heard that there's another person who's put her name in for FDP chair. Her name is Lisa. I do not know her personally, so I don't have an opinion as to her fitness or not. I think it's best if we have more candidates that put forth their vision for what they want to see happen in the state going forward. But I do want to make clear that no matter who it is, if we allow this process to cleave us and get us separated from one another and hating and distrusting each other, then we've lost a lot more than the Republicans could ever do to us. We suffer greater from self-inflicted wounds when we decide that we can't talk to so-and-so, we can't work with such and such, and, if you do it this way, then we're never going to come to the table for you, because that's just how we lose. That's just how we lose. So, my view is I still support Dwight. I think he's wonderful, and I think he's got the right vision, and I full throat, everybody knows that. I've not changed my position, but no matter who wins, we've got to make sure that we don't become a party that is so factionalized that it cannot function. Because I assure you, the progressives alone cannot win, just like the establishment alone cannot win. But I do think it's about time that we start asking, what's the easier maneuver to win? Because what I have seen is that there's been a pattern where the establishment wing of the party always insists that everybody come over to them because they have the resources, and therefore, they're the bigger group, and they insist that everybody comes to them, and that they're going to push candidates that are generally appealing and appeal to centrists and independents and all these, supposed swing voters. We have tried that over and over again, and it is not working. It isn't working. We're not winning in Florida going that way. Now, there are some people say, going towards the progressive wing isn't a winning strategy either. And I understand why they say that, because they say, well, socialism is not popular, and, the progressive wing wants too much. Its ideas are not pragmatic, and they're not implementable, and they're not easy to convey, and so forth. And so they say, no, we can't go that way. You guys come to us. Well, I think 2018 might be the year that we start thinking about moving the establishment over to the left a little bit. Not left in the sense of politics so much, but left in the sense of policy. And what I mean by that is we need to move the party in a direction where the things that the party talks about is clearly, recognizably affecting people's lives, and not in a cerebral way, but in a anecdotal, practical, pragmatic way. I think that's what I tried to do while I was campaigning, and to some extent, I think it was successful. But I think that that's something that we need to think about. My view is that in 2018, we need to be one team with one clear message upon which everybody agrees and is rowing in the same direction. We cannot have 2018 where every candidate is out there for themselves, duplicating effort, running their own platform with no clarity, no cohesion, no unity, cannibalizing each other's resources and stepping all over everybody's toes. And that whole thing does not work. 2018, we need to posture ourselves as one team with one logo, with one message that is clear, that everybody wants to be a part of. If we can figure out how to do that, I think we have a real shot at 2018. And I know that that's what I'm going to be working on in the weeks to come. As a final thought for this last Pam Chat of 2016, I want to talk a little bit about losing Carrie Fisher and George Michael. My first concert that I ever went to, was Day on the Green, big old concert in the stadium at Oakland Coliseum. And there were a whole bunch of acts, including Katrina and the Waves and Madness and all this other stuff. And I remember the headlining act was Wham. And I was blown away by George Michael's enthusiasm and his showmanship. And of course, he had hit after hit. And I think we really did lose a great talent. But he was also one of the first visible gay performers. And he was one of the first that made it okay to be out like that. And I commend him, because I know he really did suffer for being willing to put himself out like that publicly. And the other person we lost was Carrie Fisher just the day before yesterday. And what a horrible loss that was. Carrie Fisher was the first person who was a princess warrior goddess. Like, she was a princess who wasn't all pampered and cute and Disney. She was a warrior and a combatant and somebody who believed in something and who had core beliefs. And that character, Princess Leia, inspired me. She was part of what made Star Wars even work at all. And obviously, she had other roles in Hollywood. She was a producer. She was a director. She was also an outspoken advocate on the issues of mental health. And she talked about her struggles with bipolar disease and bipolar, I think it was bipolar depression, and made it obvious that people that you interact with daily can have these mental illness challenges and still be wonderful, outstanding people that you continue to interact with, that this is something that can be treated. And I'm so proud of her for being willing to do that, because I think it made it a lot okay for a lot of other people to seek help and to talk about their challenges with mental health issues. So anyway, I am very sad at the loss of Carrie Fisher and George Michael. I think 2016 was a horrible year. for a variety of reasons. And while I mourn the death of Carrie Fisher, and I mourn the death of George Michael, I mourn the death of Prince and David Bowie and Gene Wilder and so many others, I will not mourn the death of the United States of America and the Constitution. There has been a shift that has put the things that we value very, very much in jeopardy. But if the Force was with Princess Leia, the Force is with us. We now have to gather our forces, unite, be smart, be subversive, work together to ensure that this battle against this very dark force, and it is a dark force, and I will call it what it is, a dark force, does not triumph in the long term. Those dark forces may have won the battle, but it is up to us to make sure that they don't win the war. And if I have anything to say about it, they won't. I welcome 2017 and its challenges, and I bet you if we work together, we can do amazing things to take back our state and to take back our country. God bless you, and happy 2017.